It's a war crime.
Free, free Palestine!
That war crime against the people of Gaza. They are raining down thousands of the most sophisticated missiles known to humanity.
إيرلندا الدولة الأوروبية تعد واحدة من أكثر الدول الداعمة لفلسطين، وقد اتخذت مؤخراً موقفاً حاسماً بما يتعلق بالعدوان الإسرائيلي على غزة. لهذا نحن متواجدون هنا في السفارة الأيرلندية في الأردن لنجري هذه المقابلة الخاصة مع سعادة السفيرة الأيرلندية في الأردن السيدة مريان بولجر. أهلاً وسهلاً بك سعادة السفيرة، شكراً لك على إتاحة الفرصة لنا لإجراء هذا اللقاء.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today and to Rؤيا TV to talk about the terrible situation in Gaza at the moment. As you know, the situation is critical, and Ireland has been calling for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire to end the suffering that's going on there. We also are very troubled, deeply troubled by the high level of civilian casualties in Gaza. I think as a mother, as a woman, as a human being, it's been so shocking to watch what's been happening over the last few weeks. It's been really harrowing. And what we want to do is bring an end to all that. We see children and babies who've died, and it's just not acceptable, I would say. Also, we want to make sure that there's unimpeded humanitarian access, so that the supplies and the aid are getting into Gaza immediately. What's getting in at the moment, the amount of aid that's getting in is woefully inadequate, I would say. And we want to stop all this suffering that's going on. We want to give the UN agencies, particularly UNRWA, the ability to be able to address the needs of the people on the ground in Gaza. We also have been calling for the release of the hostages. There are children and elderly who have been taken hostage, and we want to see the immediate release of that.
سعادة السفيرة، هناك الكثير من التساؤلات في خضم هذا التواطؤ الغربي لتبني الرواية الإسرائيلية. هناك الكثير من التساؤلات بما يتعلق بالأسباب التي تجعل دولة من ضمن دول الاتحاد الأوروبي بأن تعتبر الملف الفلسطيني ضمن الأولويات على سياستها الخارجية، كما أنها تتصدر الرأي العام.
Ireland has had a long-standing support for Palestine and for finding a way forward in terms of a two-state solution. It's across the whole political spectrum, I would say, the support. It cuts across all, and also then the people in Ireland have been very strongly supporting Palestinians for a long time, and it's as a result of our own historical experience, I would say, in Ireland, that we support Palestinians and anyone else who is in situations that are in conflict or where people are oppressed. We have a history where we've been oppressed ourselves, and we have a deep empathy towards people. And I think our foreign policy has always been strongly supportive of humanitarian law and human rights. I would say, maybe going back a little bit, 100 years, we joined the League of Nations. Shortly after we gained our independence, just over 100 years ago, we joined the League of Nations in September 1923. And with that, as a newly independent state, we wanted to assert what our priorities were in terms of our foreign policy. And there were 5 things that we brought as priorities to the League of Nations membership. And they were humanitarian principles, multilateralism, human rights, disarmament and rule of law. And they have, in those 100 years, our foreign policy really hasn't changed all that much. They still are our guiding principles in terms of how we adopt our foreign policies and what we bring to it. It's been very consistent, I would say, over the 100 years. And I would say that sometimes that leads us into very robust conversations. So, for example, last week our Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Micheál Martin visited the region, and he spoke about our very strong position, as I said, on calling for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire and unimpeded humanitarian access.
أود أن أسمع منك تعليق بما قدمه رئيس الوزراء الأيرلندي منذ بداية العدوان الإسرائيلي على غزة، بأنه قدم انتقاد واضح وصريح لدولة الاحتلال الإسرائيلي بأن ما تقوم به بأنه شيء من الانتقام، كما انتقدها بأنها تقوم بعملية عقاب جماعي للشعب الفلسطيني. وخلال هذا الأسبوع أيضا قدم انتقاد لقوى العالم الغربي، بعض دول الاتحاد الأوروبي، باتهام مباشر بأنهم يتبعون معايير مزدوجة في الحكم عما يحصل الآن على الأرض الفلسطينية. فما تعليقك على ذلك؟
I think you're right. Our Prime Minister, called the Taoiseach, has been very strong in what he's been saying, the comments that he's making, and I think they just reflect Ireland's very strong position on this issue and how strong the feelings are around these issues. You know, that we really, everything that we want to see is in line with international humanitarian law and human rights, and that's what he's talking about really. And I know that in response to another question, he did say that while Israel has the right to defend itself, it does not have the right to do wrong. So we need to ensure that what we say, we use our voice to call out what we want, and what we want is an immediate humanitarian ceasefire.
And Israel is gaining a lot of solidarity from other parts of the world. But I believe that will evaporate, and evaporate very quickly, if the Israeli response in Gaza and elsewhere is disproportionate. So there must be restraint, there must be no attacks on civilian infrastructure. If it's unacceptable for the President of Russia to target power stations and civilian infrastructure in Ukraine, then the same must apply to the Israeli government and the actions it takes on targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure in Gaza.
سؤالي الأخير لك، هل تمارس إيرلندا أي من أدوات الضغط على دول الاتحاد الأوروبي من أجل الوصول إلى قرار وقف إطلاق النار الفوري في غزة؟
As you know, Ireland is a member of the European Union. We're actually celebrating our 50th anniversary of membership within the European Union. And while our position is maybe not every EU member state has the same position, we are using our voice again to talk about why we strongly believe that there should be an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. We have been working behind the scenes diplomatically to talk to our partners in the EU and beyond about the reason why we want everything to be in line with international humanitarian law and bring an end to the suffering that we see at the moment. And we have been successful in changing some of the languages around on the EU Council conclusions, for example, to while it's not as far-reaching as a humanitarian ceasefire, we have been able to agree language to include humanitarian pauses. Again, very important. If we have humanitarian pauses, if we have access to humanitarian corridors, we can get the aid in and we can help people on the ground in Gaza. So I think that's really important. Another thing that we have also been raising, and this goes beyond the last few weeks, is the situation in the West Bank. We're very worried about the situation in the West Bank, and talking to our EU partners about the situation there and the escalation in violence there, which is very worrying also, I would say. If you go back in our history a little bit again, talking about our history, like over 100 years ago, our country was partitioned into North and South, and what happened as a result of that was that we had a conflict that lasted about 30 years in Northern Ireland called the Troubles. And that came to an end through a peace accord called the Good Friday Agreement, and we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement this year. And this peace accord laid the foundations to bring what was a conflict where people were dying, where people were looking at each other with hatred and hopelessness, I would say, to a situation where we were able to bring about. And also then, in terms of Ireland and our own humanitarian support, we have a long-standing relationship in the occupied Palestinian territories. We have a permanent representation in Ramallah, and they do an awful lot of work. A lot of their work is focused on humanitarian and development issues. Our humanitarian funding this year alone has increased by 75%, and it's the highest amount, reflecting the situation on the ground and our deep desire to help the people on the ground. And one of the things that we've focused on as a government and as the mission in Ramallah is on education. So working with the Palestinian Authority to assist with educational initiatives in schools, but also providing scholarships to Palestinian students to go to Ireland and to study. And what we believe is that the future of the occupied Palestinian territories is with the Palestinian people. We want to build leadership skills amongst people and education. And it's something that we're doing here on the ground here in Jordan also. As the ambassador, I'm proud to support an initiative called the Jordan Young Scientists, which supports STEM skills and which includes UNRWA schools. It's a competition that's been very successful in Ireland, and we've replicated it here in Jordan. And we're looking forward to welcoming more UNRWA schools into this competition for next year. So I did want to mention that. So it is something that we prioritise as a government as our missions abroad.
أود أن أشكرك بالنهاية سعادة السفيرة، شكرا جزيلا لمرة أخرى لإعطائنا الفرصة لإجراء هذه المقابلة. جميع الأنظار تتجه الآن إلى إيرلندا، الكل الآن يحترم دولة أوروبية مثل إيرلندا لوقوفها بشكل واضح مع الأبرياء ولطلبها أيضا بشكل واضح غير عن كل الدول أو أغلب الدول الغربية لضرورة وقف إطلاق النار ومساعدة الأبرياء وحمايتهم. شكرا لك سعادة السفيرة.
Shukran, Mace. Thank you very much for allowing me the time to talk about Ireland and our position during this very difficult time.